which is a tactic of manipulation. Is sleep deprivation is a huge key in cults to basically make them malleable to your ideas, malleable to your suggestions.
Murders, mysteries, unexplained stories, and our family's crazy opinions on them all. Join us now. The Family School of Thought is in session.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome again to the Family School of Thought. I'm ready to get started. Cassie, what's the weather like in Portland?
It was a nice day. We did get a air quality warning, which usually just means there might be like a lot of dust or smoke in the air. Sometimes that happens in fall, but I didn't notice anything crazy. I wasn't really outside though, so it's been nice.
We've had pretty good weather here. It got really windy this afternoon, and then we had some rain, but not a lot.
Yeah, it rained last night. It rained last night, and then on my way to work today it was rainy, but it was kind of like an overcast day today, but it wasn't too bad.
Yep.
Matt is in the Florida Keys right now, and he's been texting me about how ungodly hot it is, and he can't go anywhere without sweating. So,
the Keys didn't have any hurricane damage.
I don't think so. But, like Matt hasn't said anything, but he hasn't sent any real pictures either. So I don't know.
I was going to ask how's Grandpa's place, because I saw the town was on the news.
Right where he's at. But he has where he puts his golf carts for his, he had that shed that the roof, and just a spot came off. But that's all that happened to him.
That's good.
Said taken away, but behind him, guy's house is gone.
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
And and like Ron and Judy, they didn't have anything, but Larry had a tree fall on his carport and smashed that, and Teresa had a lot of damage at her house, and so they had a lot of damage, but he survived pretty well, I guess.
That Tom and Donna.
Well, he's not there.
Dan, you know what I'm talking about? His place is totally wiped out.
Totally gone. His is gone. So there's, and then the lady across the street and the guy next door, he lost his carport, and the lady across the street, didn't she lose her lanai or something?
Yeah.
That Donna. Yeah.
Which
so they had a lot of damage. He again didn't have that much, so
that's crazy.
But none of them were there during the storm, though, right?
No,
that Donna was.
That's the thing too, because even the people that were there had to evacuate.
Yeah.
Donna saved about it, but she didn't leave her house to go check his out or anything because it was flooded too. And his house wasn't flooded.
That's what I saw. It was flooded.
High, but people Donna couldn't even go outside of her house because it was all flooded.
So. That's what I was worried about, because on the news it was like underwater, and I was like, oh
no.
Yeah. So they had a lot in that area, but he survived pretty well again. Good. So
he's lucky.
They're chomping at the bit to get down there. I can tell you
that. After that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, before we get started, please, if you hit that like button, that helps us out a great deal. Share, comment, subscribe to our channel. We would appreciate it. And again, any thoughts or comments you might have, you can contact us at thefamilyschoolofthought@gmail.com. Okay. Yes. With that, Jess, tell us some fun facts for the week.
Yeah, I got some mental floss amazing facts of the week. I got a couple that I want to get into, but one, it was just recently Columbus Day / Indigenous People Day / Canadian Thanksgiving. So I know we kind of touched base on this in previous podcasts, but I just wanted to point out it is a mental floss amazing fact. Christopher Columbus was not the first person to discover America. So our history books are not correct on that. Yeah. So
He didn't even make it to America, by the way.
No, right.
Didn't make it to America.
No. But the first Viking explorer, Leif Erikson, which the name sounds familiar, so I must have learned about him at some point. But Leif Erikson beat Christopher Columbus by about 500 years. Leif Erikson likely landed in Newfoundland, Canada, around 1000 CE, which CE is AD, I think, right? Is that the new? I don't know. But there you go.
That's funny you said that because I was like researching a story I was going to do just today, and it kind of ties in with that. I won't tell you because I might end up doing it, but about who the anyway.
Yeah. So there you go. So I definitely think that, Christopher Columbus was not a great guy. Let's just leave it at that. So, okay, that wasn't even really supposed to be a long fun fact. That was just supposed to be
a fun fact.
So, okay, mental floss, amazing fact. So in 1964, before they hit it big in America, the Rolling Stones, Mom, Dad, let's see if you guys know this about them. The Rolling Stones.
I already know this. I can tell you right now.
Okay, they recorded a jingle for a breakfast cereal. What was it?
Oh my gosh, I know this
Cheerios.
too.
No.
Honey Nut.
No, it been
just said Cheerios.
Lucky Charms or. I know. I've heard this.
The jingle was called Jukebox, and it says, "Wake up in the morning and there's a snap in the place. Wake up in the morning
Snap,
and
crackle,
there's
pop.
a crackle." Crackle in its place.
Yeah.
Those are some of the.
I know it was a famous. I mean, a big time cereal, but I'd heard the story before, but
yeah. So they recorded a little jingle for Rice Krispies.
They probably have hung their head in shame ever since.
That's how he stays so skinny. He lives off Snap, Crackle, Pop Rice Krispies.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
That's how he gets his moves.
Yep. Okay, so my next one. In 1915, a 30-year-old South Carolinian named Essie Dunbar suffered a fatal attack of epilepsy. So, or so everybody thought. And after she was declared being dead, doctors placed her body in a coffin and scheduled her for her funeral the next day so that her sister, who lived out of town, could still be there to pay her respects. Unfortunately, Dunbar's sister didn't travel fast enough, and she arrived at the ceremony just as the last bits of dirt were being thrown onto Dunbar's grave. Insistent on wanting to be able to say goodbye to her sister Essie one last time, Dunbar's sister ordered that the body be removed, and when the coffin lid was open, Essie sat up and smiled. And she lived another 47 years.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Thought that was a cool
So
story.
did she think of it like she thought it was a joke? Or like Essie was like playing at a prank? Or
it doesn't go into details on that. So I'm not 100% sure. It just says she sat up and smiled. So maybe she woke up from a nap. I don't know.
How long was she buried for?
And how old was she?
She was 30 years old. And it doesn't say how long she was buried for, but she was put into a coffin and then buried the next day. And then they were waiting to bury her until her sister got there, but she didn't get there quick enough. So she wasn't really in the ground very long, I would say, under dirt. But she was in the coffin for a good amount of time. So
how could she breathe?
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure about this story.
Well, there you go. That's a mental floss, amazing fact. Okay.
I know one time at work we were having that discussion because they used to put bells in coffins. So
just in case
they weren't really dead. And I'm like, that's not true. Maybe they put that in there, but they're not going to live once they're buried because there's no oxygen.
Well, actually, did you know people, so they would tie basically the string around the dead people's fingers And due to rigor mortis, the finger would move, and so the bells would go off late at night.
Yeah.
So they stopped doing that because the bells were ringing, but nobody was actually alive.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Huh.
Well, that goes with a joke that I always say, like, what do you think Janice would be doing if she was alive today? What do you think she'd be doing? Scratching at her coffin, trying to get out.
Okay. Sure.
Yep.
Okay, that was bad. Let's Cassie, you got a song for us?
I do. So I don't know, you might know this one, you might not. But this week's song is going to be Exit by U2. Does anybody know it?
Yeah.
So it was one of the darker songs on their Joshua Tree album. And Bono actually wrote it while he was reading Norman Mailer's The Executioner's Song from 1980, which was about serial killer Gary Gilmore. He was also reading Truman Capote's In Cold Blood, a 1966 novel. And he said that he wrote it in a way to get into a serial killer's mind. So it's a darker song about kind of I don't really know, like the lyrics kind of revolve around somebody who seems to be like looking for something or waiting for something. There's lyrics such as it's mostly like my love, but it's this very dark tone song. And he said he wanted to write a song with a sense of violence in it. So it's not a violent song, but there's a feeling of violence to it. And he probably would later go on to regret saying any of this or kind of this song in general, because notable killer Robert John Bardo would go on to say this song inspired him to murder American actress Rebecca Schaeffer. Whom he had stalked for 3 years before shooting her in her own home. At his trial, they actually played this song, Exit by U2, and he was notably singing along to the song.
Yeah, I remember that.
Creepy.
Yeah, creepy. Super creepy. Yeah. So I'm sure Bono wasn't, he kind of was like, oh, no, not like that.
Right.
It's pretty creepy.
Well, I'm sure the Beatles never would think Helter Skelter would cause them any problems neither.
Well, no,
Helter Skelter
I don't
was
think anybody.
Roller coaster ride. It wasn't even about killing people.
Yeah, right. So I don't think they go out of their way to like do this, but it's one of those things where they probably regret saying that they want to get into the mind of a killer or have a song with a sense of violence when it's used for violence.
Wow.
It's crazy.
There you go. That's a song for the week.
All right. Okay, Cass, I think you're up this week, are you not?
I am.
Good. What you got for us?
Well, I have one, and I might regret saying this, but it's something that I've been obsessed with since I watched a documentary. And so this is the in-depth dive into the Nexium cult.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So all my information comes from The Vow, a documentary series on HBO. Also the podcast. It's a Canadian broadcasting podcast called Uncover, Escaping Nexium, as well as a podcast Cults on their 4-part series of Nexium. But
this is the one where the girl from Smallville. Yeah, I knew it was Superman, but yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So this is probably, I don't know, to me it is one of the most notable like nowadays cult. I mean, there's many that are actually like kind of in the news right now. But I think to me it's the most notable. It's the only one that's like actually had people charged with, crimes. But I also know a lot of people who don't know this story. So it's
Well,
kind
and
of
different
interesting
than
to
other
me.
cults too. This was sex trafficking, right?
Well, it's the thing is, it's like that's basically what they got charged for, but it didn't start as that. And also the reason I'm doing it this week is because I think on October 17th, The Vow is having a part 2 where they're doing a second part of the series where it's based off of Nancy Saltzman, who was not part of the sex cult. And she's basically, it looks like from the trailer, she's trying to say like Keith Ranieri, who is the founder of this, it's supposed to be a company, founder of this company, leader of the sex cult. He like basically ruined her company and like all this stuff, and she's trying to place the blame on him, which I don't know. I'll try to say most of it. It does seem mostly his fault to begin with, but I wouldn't say the company in itself is not a cult, because they itself, before the sex cult came along, were already being considered as a cult. So it's not like the sex cult thing was the only thing wrong with this place. But anyway, we'll start. And this is kind of, I'm trying to like smush this into an hour, so I know I'm going to lose a lot of information in the process, but if you want like the full story, which is insane and crazy, and there's so many things to be said about this, I would go watch The Vow or any of the podcasts I mentioned, or just Google. It's insane. There's so much information to this. But anyway, Keith Ranieri was born on April 26, 1960. He was told at a very young age by his parents that he was gifted, and he was even tested. And so it said that he was had a very high IQ as a child. He would later go on to claim that he was talking in full sentences at 1 year old, and able to read full books at 2 years old, and even that he was a piano prodigy as a child. So he already has a very big self-inflated ego, and it seems like that is a lot of the problem, is that in some of the interviews with other people, his father is stated as saying that after he was told he was gifted and that he tested high on IQ as a child, it was like a switch flipped in him, and he like all of a sudden had this very like holier than thou attitude. He had a huge ego. He had friends in school, but it was clear that he thought he was better than any of his friends. A lot of his friends said that they noticed the difference as well. And in his teen years, he had a lot of, I wouldn't say issues with girls, but he seemed to be kind of this magnetic force with women and young girls, especially. His parents later divorced when he was, I think, a young child, or at least early teens. And he claims that his mother was an alcoholic, and he had to take care of her a lot of times and make sure she wasn't taking too many pills or drinking too much when he was really young. And there's unconfirmed reports that she may have abused him mentally, physically, and even some say sexually. So he, from the get-go, kind of had this inflated ego, these issues with women where he kind of blamed women for him having to take care of them. And this basically would be kind of like the nail in the coffin almost. This was, the start of it all for him. I believe he dropped out of school, like high school, and got his GED and went to college. And he claims that he basically got a bunch of degrees, multiple degrees in mathematics, biology, and some other things. Very on paper looks like smart degrees. But his GPA, I think, was revealed to only be like a 2.24 or something when he graduated. So not that GPA is
wasn't
really
gifted.
Well, the thing is like not that I I personally don't really believe in the GPA system. I just don't like, it's such a weird system to
No.
begin with. Like a weird thing to like put a number on whether or not you graduated the best you could, or, you know, anything like that. Like, I think as long as you graduated, like, who cares what your grades were? You went there, you took the class. Like, it is what it is. But he graduated college, continued to kind of have this, he would later go on to say the smartest man in the world, smartest man alive mentality. And he got a job at Amway, which is, I don't know too much about the company, but it was a multi-level marketing business.
They're out of Grand Rapids.
Good. Well, this is in New York. So he worked there in New York, in a New York business. But it's basically a pyramid scheme, which is what all multi-level marketing businesses are. No matter what you say, it is a pyramid scheme.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but you know who I can't think of her name. Betsy DeVos.
Betsy? Yeah. She runs Amway. That's her company?
That's her family. I don't know if she married into it or if they're that, but that's where her
the name sounded familiar, and I meant to research it more, but it was one of those things where I got so obsessed with this, I didn't look up the company. But basically, he worked at Amway while he was in his early 20s, and basically got the blueprint of how to run and own a multi-level marketing business. And while he was there, he would have lots of parties. Like the thing is he's a very charismatic person. So he kind of has always had a huge group of people around him. And when he worked at Amway, he would often have large parties where he would talk about his ideas of the human potential and how to get there and what we need to do as a society to reach our, utmost potential. And a lot of people would go and listen to him. Mostly women would go. He, even at this time, had a lot of claims that he was, I don't want to say abusing women, but like manipulating women into relationships. Even as a teen, he was caught by his mother calling multiple girls a night, telling them that he only loves them and they're the special person in his life. And his mother got so worried about it that she called his dad and was like, "This is really weird. Like, why is he talking to so many women?" Which I think even at that time they probably played it off as, well, he's a player, or he's a a ladies' man. Like, he just has lots of women. And so I think, and especially when he was in the early 20s, I think people just played it off as that. And I think that kind of attitude really affected it. It affected the problem, because nobody not forced him, but like nobody told him, like, what are you doing? Like, you can't be dating multiple women at the same time, which he would later go on to do. Like, that's kind of what he's known for. He claims to be polyamorous. He wants multiple women to be in relationships with him. So this attitude clearly goes on to spark a lot of the problems that we see later on in his life. So he meets, I can't remember her name, but he meets a journalist while he is at one of his parties, who asks him to take another IQ test, because he's claiming he's very smart. And people basically say, like, all right, well, let's test it again. Let's test it as an adult. And he actually scores 178 on this test, which, to put it in perspective, Einstein, who understood relativity, scored 160. So he has a higher IQ than Einstein. He would later go on to inflate this to 240. He would tell people he scored 240 on this test. And I do want to point out that it was later discovered that this was an at-home test. So he took this test home and was able to take the test by himself. Yes.
It was an open book test.
It was an open book test that he got 178 on. So is he the smartest man alive?
Really familiar, like a former president was just bragging about.
Well, it got
Yeah.
so bad that Australia's Guinness Book of World Records put him in the book as one of the world's smartest people alive. So
Yeah.
apparently nobody wanted to do the work to research whether or not he was actually the smartest person alive, or if he just could take a test with a computer in front. Well, this was 1998, so probably not a computer in front of him, but he was able to find the information, I'm guessing. But so all this happens. He starts his own business, Consumers Byline, in 1990. And it basically was a program where members of this Consumers Byline would get discounts for being members at pretty much, it was like a call-in, almost like an encyclopedia. I can't remember like what those like salesmen were, but like you just basically call in and like order stuff. It was kind of like the phone-in Amazon almost. But you would get discounts for shopping through them and being a member, and you would get more discounts the more people you referred to. And so the more people you refer to, the more discounts you get, so on and so forth. Obviously, pyramid scheme, which in 1992, just 2 years later, basically fell apart for being a pyramid scheme, and he was caught by the FBI, and his business had to be shut down. And again, during this time, he is also under investigation for sexually assaulting young girls and grooming young girls. So he's being looked at for multiple things at this point. But still, apparently, he is a very personable person, and nobody seems to find anything wrong with it. He has a girlfriend who, after Consumers Byline is shut down, he moves in with her and her son, and they basically have this homeopathic nutrition store that they run in New York for a minute. And his girlfriend, her name is Toni, in 1997 met with a woman named Nancy Saltzman, who was a therapist, but she was also somebody who apparently claimed to be a neuro-linguistics expert, which is, I don't know, but apparently she was able to help a lot of like higher up CEOs at huge companies work through problems, anything like that. But she helped this Toni. She decided to take on Toni as a therapist. But before she took Toni on, Nancy was the therapist, and before she took Toni on as a client, Toni was explaining Keith, her boyfriend, to Nancy, and Nancy called him a psychopath from what she was being told, and that Toni should leave him. And this was before she became Nancy's client. Now she becomes Nancy's client as a therapist, and all of a sudden she has flipped the script. She no longer is calling Keith a psychopath, but she is blaming Toni for their relationship problems due to her unresolved childhood trauma of being molested when she was a child, information that Toni, had only told Keith.
Ooh.
Oh.
So somehow Nancy Saltzman knew information that this person had never told her, but had told Keith. So, and she's no longer calling Keith a psychopath, which should indicate some things to Toni, but apparently it did not. 3 months after this meeting, and Toni becoming Nancy's client, Keith and Nancy started a business in 1998 called the Executive Success Program, which was supposed to be self-improvement classes for executive and higher-ups in the business world to improve their standings, improve their personalities, improve basically anything that they were having problems with where they felt like they couldn't move further in their life goals or positions. But because of Keith's reputation and his failed businesses, most executives and CEO clients of Nancy, who they were kind of banking on being in these classes, dropped out, and they said they didn't want to work with Keith. So Nancy and Keith basically changed the programming to basically be anybody who wanted self-help anybody who needed a little like self-improvement in their lives. They could take these classes, and basically they marketed it as, you know, they could help actresses and actors get Oscars. They could help Olympians win Olympic gold medals, which I don't really know how these two people with executive success are going to help Olympic gold medalists, but hey, that's what they marketed it as. They were going to help people improve their lives. That's what they started this program as. So it's basically you have to take classes, and you start the starting classes as a student. Like the first class you take is usually a 5 to 6 day long seminar that costs $3,000. Yeah. And a lot of people had trouble coming up with this money, but they basically, anytime they would recruit people and find people to take these classes who would say like, oh, $3,000 is a lot. Like that's rent for a couple months, you know, they would say, well, do you want to improve or do you want to stay stagnant where you're at? And they basically would kind of manipulate these people into taking these classes, these $3,000 classes. And it worked. This was a huge success program. It started to basically, once it started to kick off, it began having ranking systems, and they would have different sashes to show different ranks, and they were different colors. And basically you would start out as a white scarf or a sash, and you would move up to orange and green and purple depending on your rank in this group. And Keith, being the founder of this, decided that he had the spiritual sash, which was only he could get because he was basically the guru, the know-all, the smartest man alive in his own words. And he decided that he was going to be called the Vanguard. And so anybody referring to him would have to refer to him as the Vanguard. And Nancy also got a title. She was a prefect, and she basically had a scarf that also nobody could really get to because it was only for her, but it was lower than Keith's. So it was the ranking system. You had your color, and then you had to basically get 4 stripes on your scarf before you could move up to the next color. And this had to deal with how many hours you put in classes, how many classes you took, how many people you recruited into the program, which it was supposed to be basically how many, to begin with, it was supposed to be more about how many hours you put into classes, how many classes you taught was what you would get stripes for. But then most people realized that they would only get stripes if they recruited a certain amount of people. And so it became a multi-level marketing scheme where you have to, the more people you recruit in, the better your standing is in the company. And again, classes started at about $3,000, and there were other classes that could be up to about $7,500 to take. And these were like the higher standing classes that you could take. And a lot of people that I saw in the documentary and in the Escaping Nexium podcast basically said the first week that these classes that they would go to not knowing anything about Nexium, or at the time it was called the Executive Success Program, said that the first 2 days they were like, what did I spend my money on? Like, this is a scam. Like, this is like, there's no way this is going to help me in my life. And then basically the person who recruited them would be like, well, you just got to stay till the end of the week. You just have to stay till the end of these classes and you'll get it. And most of them say they did. The thing is that most of the people said they stayed for the full week, and it helped them. It built up their confidence. They learned how to deal with problems in their life, mentality problems. Unfortunately, it seems to me like most of the classes were basically telling the people to stop seeing themselves as victims, and taking responsibility for things that happen in their life, and that you are at fault for everything in your life, which, knowing now that it is a cult and a sex cult, seems to be manipulative and emotionally manipulative to basically force people to not believe that they are victims in these crimes that are now committed against them. So it started out as a cult. Like I see a lot of people saying like, oh, if it hadn't become a sex cult, it wouldn't be a bad place. But it already had cult mentality. It was already telling people to listen to what they are saying and nothing else. And so basically the students would take classes taught by coaches who would be orange sashes. And then they would participate in a curriculum called Exploration of Meaning, or EMs, where the coach would basically talk through the students' problems and kind of get down to the nitty-gritty of why their life is stagnant, why they feel like nothing is happening in their life. And most of the time, these negative origins would be the person's fears or like traumas, basically. A lot of people said that they would basically pick at them until they got a trauma that happened in their childhood or in their life that was basically holding them back. Unbeknownst to them, or kind of announced to them, these coaches are basically taking notes the whole time, and then these notes are going to Nancy and Keith. And so now they're basically using these fears and these traumas against these people and basically using them as manipulative tactics to get, emotional blackmail on these people and say like, well, you don't like being told to do this certain thing because you're afraid of this. And so everything kind of came back to your fear is making you a victim, and we all know that you're not a victim, so why do you have that fear in the first place? So a lot of these tactics and these curriculums were based off of emotional abuse and emotional manipulation, which again is more on Nancy than it is on Keith, because that was her field of study.
Sounds a lot like Scientology.
So I was just going to say the same thing.
A lot of it is compared to Scientology, especially in the podcast that I listen to, Cults. They basically say, like, this is the exact same as this in Scientology. They're using these tactics, which are exactly like Scientology. So maybe even Nancy and Keith kind of took little things from Scientology. I don't know. I don't think they've ever said anything about it. But so in the documentary, The Vow, two of the biggest people are Mark Valentes and Sarah Edmondson. And Mark is one of the first people to say that basically once you become a coach and once you become a proctor, you have to teach so many classes. You have to go in every day and teach a certain amount of hours of classes to these new students or coaches or anything like that. You have to basically create your own curriculum to teach in these classes. And sometimes you would have to have up to 16 hours a day teaching these classes. And early on, there were many reports of sleep deprivation and problems with the coaches and the proctors basically having mental breakdowns because of sleep deprivation. They didn't feel like they had enough time in the day to do everything that they needed to do for the executive success program and sleep and eat, which is a tactic of manipulation. Is sleep deprivation is a huge key in cults. To basically make them malleable to your ideas, malleable to your suggestions. One of the biggest things was, so once this really took off, it was based in Albany, New York. Once it took off, there was offices in Canada and California, in Mexico. A lot of these people who were taking these classes basically decided to open their own offices and start this program in other locations. But one of the biggest things was everything had to go through Keith. Everything, if you had a question, you had to talk to Keith about it. You had to he basically had to be in the know at all times. But he would say he's too busy to do anything over the phone, or you have to. He basically told them, you have to come to me, you have to come to Albany. I'm too busy. All this stuff, and most of the time, the only time he had to answer any of these questions was when he would be playing volleyball late at night, because he loved volleyball. He loved staying active, and many people felt like he would basically make them come to these volleyball games, sit there, watch him play volleyball, and then the moment they go on break or the moment they take a timeout, he basically gets bum rushed by all these people who have these questions that they need the answers to. He has to know this question. He has to tell me what to do. And so it was like a rock star. You had to basically like fight to get his attention. And it was like, I think in the documentary, they said they would play until like 2, 3 in the morning. And so you would have to wait your turn to talk to him for information that you needed his go for on. And that caused a lot of problems with people not being able to get his response or answers, or basically like they would have to wait until they were allowed to speak to him. And it created this like God complex around him. He saw himself as this all-knowing, all-seeing, everybody has to go through him. I don't have time for everyone, but I have time to play volleyball every night until 2, 3 in the morning. And it got so bad that basically they were supposed to have a week every year where they celebrated the company, where they basically had a summer camp for all the higher ups to come to and basically celebrate their successes for the year. But it just so happened to fall on Keith's birthday. So it became known as Vanguard Week, which again is what Keith instructed them to call him. He was Vanguard. So they had a whole week, which actually was 10 days, where they celebrated his birthday. They would celebrate their own successes, but again, it would be contributed to Keith and what he kind of made them succeed to. Everything was thanked Keith. And I actually forgot to talk about it, but during the ranking system of this group, you would have rules of how you were supposed to treat people higher in rank than you. And one of them was the handshake. Anybody of lower status was never allowed to put their hand above a higher status. So the instead of like a handshake being like this, it would be like this, and the higher status would be here, lower status would be here. So they had to be lower than the higher rankers. And you had to stand anytime a person of higher rank came into a room. And also you had to bow to anybody who was of higher rank than you. And Keith would often come to these classes and everyone would have to stand and bow to him as he basically presented himself to the class. And one of the biggest things that helped this company succeed was that 2 of the heiresses of the Seagram's fortune, the Seagram liquor, were kind of, their families were sort of philanthropists, but they basically had contacts with the Dalai Lama of India and got him to come talk to a group of 3,000 Nexium members. And at this talk, or at this thing where the Dalai Lama came, he put this spiritual Tibetan sash on around Keith's neck and basically thanked him for all his good work. And so it literally just catapulted his ego, and he just, even all the Nexium people were like, well, the Dalai Lama thinks that Keith is this high guru who knows all and sees all. And so everybody it was like this huge celebration of, we've done it, we've made it, Keith is a god now. And And it really was their high point. So this was like in 2009 when this happened, and this was basically the peak of Nexium. Because despite, all these coaches saying that they didn't have time to do these classes, they were sleep deprived, a lot of them were having mental problems, they were gaining members by the hundreds. They were gaining notable names such as the Seagram's heiresses. Award-winning filmmakers were joining these groups, celebrity actors, celebrity socialites. Basically, anybody who was anybody knew about these classes or knew somebody in these classes, and they were joining them. And Allison Mack of Supernatural was one of them, or not Supernatural, I'm sorry, Smallville was one of them. And actually in the documentary The Vow, you see multiple members of Smallville at these meetings. So it seems like maybe somebody else joined. Yeah, like maybe somebody else from the Smallville cast joined and was like, oh, you should take these classes. And so she took this class, and I think she went to like a big conference. It wasn't like she went to one of these like 15 to 20 people classes. She went to like this big conference where once Keith, I don't know why he was so excited about her, but basically as soon as they found out she was going to go, Keith sent all his higher ups, like Nancy Saltzman, Laura Saltzman, her daughter. Right. He sent the Seagram's heiresses. He sent basically all his higher power people to this conference to basically get her on a plane. This was in California. He was still in New York. They got her, Allison Mack, on this plane and flew her out to New York, and that was it. Like that was it for Allison Mack. She was happy, like she was just immersed almost immediately. She was automatically talking about how much she loved the program, begging other celebrities to join these programs. I think she even was like on Twitter, like telling Emma Watson, who is a known like feminist person, she was telling Emma, like, you need to join this group, you have to, it's like a feminist, like everybody, woman empowering, all this stuff. So like immediately she was in the group.
Who was her mother? Her mother is famous.
No. So you're thinking of I can't think of her name, but she was from show. It's not a soap opera, but it was a soap opera. The daughter's name is India. That's all I know. Is that the daughter's name is India, and it was like what is it called? It's some like TV show that would like ran for forever. I can't think of what it's called. But no, Allison Mack was just a regular old celebrity. I think her parents like maybe did finances. I don't know. That's the thing, is I don't know why Allison Mack, who maybe at the time like Smallville was kind of a popular show, but like I don't know why she was so focused on. Maybe unfortunately she was easy to manipulate. It seems like she was very easy to manipulate because it's not like it took years for her to get this bad. Like it was almost as soon as she met Keith, she was under his spell, and she was already very much willing to do anything for him. But so in 2006, a bunch of subsects of this group basically started, and that's why they turned their name from the Executive Success Program to the more umbrella term of Nexium, which Nexium is spelt very weird. It's spelt NXIVM, which I think is more, it's supposed to be like more Roman numerals, but it is spelt really weird, just to put that out there. But so in 2006, Jeunesse, which is what Allison Mack was indoctrinated into, which is supposed to be this woman empowerment group, basically women helping women. But again, it was started by Keith. It was ran by his now known as harem, which was basically a bunch of the higher up women were sleeping with him. And they were basically in charge of this group, which obviously would lead to other members who are being recruited by these members having sexual relationships with Keith. he was saying he was pious, he was a virtuous man. To everybody who talked to him, I think even that's how he got the Dalai Lama to come, was he basically claimed to be this non-sexually active man. But he was sleeping with, I think they said upwards of like 30 women at this time. Yeah. And I can't remember who she says the name is. This came from the podcast, but one of the higher up members of his harem basically visited the abortion clinic so many times with young women members, to get abortions for these young women, that the clinic workers recognized her almost immediately and knew what she was there for with somebody else. So, yeah. And unfortunately, when I say young women, I do mean young girls. Most of these were underage girls getting abortions. So, yeah. Hey, it's gross. Another group that became started was the Society of Protectors in 2011. Was an all-men's group. Basically, Jeunesse worked so well that they started an all-male group that was supposed to basically, as the name suggests, be protectors. I think Mark Valentes said that, I think he started the group, and he said that it was basically supposed to be a bunch of classes that would take boys into men. Turn boys into men, be protectors, be the strong member of the relationship. But unfortunately, this one seemed to turn pretty sour very quickly. Keith would attend many of these classes where he would basically sit at the front of the class and talk a lot about how men have this innate urge to be polyamorous. They're never supposed to settle down and be with one woman. But then it was also, he would talk a lot about how it was women's fault, that women are inherently narcissistic and self-preserving. And women who would attend these classes, who were asked to attend these classes, would oftentimes say that they were demeaned while they were there. They would basically have to stand, like they would stand in the midst of this group of men and basically ranked. The men would say, well, she's wearing a shirt that shows like a little bit of cleavage, so she's obviously insecure and needs male attention. She's wearing jeans that really accentuate body parts, so she needs attention. She's trying to get attention from us. And then they would rank the women who were there and say who was the best, who was the worst. And this, again, was supposed to be the Society of Protectors. So, seems about right. And so both of these subgroups basically would ask members who join these subgroups to offer up collaterals. And basically at the time, what this meant was large sums of money. And some people even claim to have offered up their mortgages to be collaterals, and the collaterals would only be returned to the member if they completed what they set out for goals. If not, the company and the groups would keep their collaterals, which again was large sums of money, up to like $2,000, and sometimes the house mortgages. So they now have the deeds to some of these people's houses. That seems not corrupt at all, but hey, whatever.
Hey, I want to do that. Put my livelihood on the line.
And even so, I'm not sure about Jeunesse, but Mark Valentes says that the Society of Protectors started readiness drills, which we would later see in DOS, which is the sex cult group, which would be anytime the higher ranking member would text his group ready, they would have to respond in a certain amount of time. Now, I don't know for the Society Protectors what this time limit was. For DOS, it was they had to respond they had to respond in under a minute. And these readiness drills could happen at any time of the day. And if anybody failed these readiness drills, the entirety like the group as a whole would be punished for one person maybe at 3 a.m. not answering a readiness drill within a minute. And
These
so now we
people
get
are
in.
crazy. How can they get into these cults?
And that's what a lot of these people, now that it has been, the thing is that even, so I think in 2009, maybe like right before the Dalai Lama or right after the Dalai Lama, there was this big Forbes article about Keith and how he's this huge up and coming businessman. And it was a scathing, like they thought it was going to be this wonderful article about this group, but it was basically this scathing article about how this is a cult and how Keith is manipulating people in the cult using money from these heiresses and money from his like ex-girlfriends or ex-wives or people who are still in the group. He's using their money. And so like it was never at a point where it was not being called out for its problems. So I don't know how it got past some of these people. A lot of people who have now come out against the cults say they don't know how it happened either. Like they don't know where it started for them and why it got so bad. But again, I think it comes down to people who are going to these classes. Not that I don't think self-help classes or self-improvement classes are bad, but a lot of times these are people who are easily manipulated because they are searching for something. They need something, but they can't put their finger on it. And so they're asking for somebody else to tell them what they need. And that is a very easy tactic to basically manipulate people and saying, I know exactly what you need. And only I can provide that for you.
But
and that's
for
what these
people to lose all of their money and their house.
But the thing is that they wrap it up in this bow of like, well, that's not, I'm not trying to steal this money from you. You didn't achieve your goal. So you knew when you gave me this as a collateral that it was a possibility. You just thought you could get to this goal, but you didn't. So it's insane, but it is what it is. People fall into cults. We know this. We gotta help, but I think I saw somewhere, I don't know if it was connected to Nexium, but basically people said it's easier to fool people into something than to fool them out of it. So once you're there, it's really hard to basically.
It's very hard. It's very hard once you have invested the money, the time, and years into something.
Right.
To say, oh, you just kind of have to keep going along with it because you're too invested into it.
Right. And I think that's what a lot of people said, especially once the monetary collaterals were being introduced, was that I've already put so much money into this. My house, the deed to my house is on the line. I have to stick with this. And even so, I didn't really get into it because it's kind of it goes too much into Keith's life, but people who would leave the executive success program would be sued by Keith, and basically he would drop all these lawsuits on them he would basically say that they were trying to steal his idea and basically take his classes somewhere else and start their own business, which again is exactly what he did. But he would use basically the two heiresses from Seagram's had pretty good lawyers, and that's what they got charged for, was that they would drop all these lawsuits on people who left the group. So that was another fear of you can't leave the group because you become this pariah and you become this I can't remember the exact word they called it, but there's a word that they used for people that didn't believe in the group anymore, and they didn't want to be this pariah to the group anymore. They couldn't talk. If they left the group, they couldn't talk to their friends. Most of these people now have been in it for years. All of their friends are in this group. So if they leave the group, they lose everybody. which is what you see with the people who did leave, is that they basically had to fight against their friends.
I'm sure there is some. I'm sure it's the same as like, I'm just thinking with like the Playboy bunnies in that kind of a situation with Hugh Hefner's girlfriends, where a lot of them showed like on the outside that they wanted to be there, but in reality he was holding like revenge porn, or they would be intoxicated and he would take pictures of them and say that, hey, if you leave, these are going out, these are being leaked. Which I think when you choose to pose for Playboy, you have that control over what you're showing, the nakedness of whatever, compared to somebody else taking a naked picture of you, or a pornographic picture of you without your consent. It's a completely different situation. And I'm sure that it's the same with these cults though too. Like, hey, you leave, we're going to destroy your name and destroy your reputation.
Well, that's I'm glad you brought that up, because now we're going to get into DOS, which was created in 2015. It stands for Dominus Obsequious Sororium, which is translated to Master over Slave Women.
Nice.
I think they initially told the women, so this is supposed to be an all-women group, again, like Jeunesse. I think they originally told the women that it stood for Master over Slave, which still has its problematic ideals. But I think, the women who would recruit into this, which was mostly Allison Mack and Laura Saltzman, would basically tell these people that it, again, is like Jeunesse, where it's supposed to be this women empowering other women, but it basically, we're holding you to a higher standard. You're no longer just allowed to be in the group. You have to be active in the group. And it has to be, I can't remember what Sarah Edmondson, who is one of the first whistleblowers from DOS to come out, what she kind of said was, what Laura told her was like, it was something along the lines of like, if other women are holding you accountable for you saying you're going to do something, you're more likely to do it, which was a big thing for the Society of Protectors. They were held accountable by the other group members. And this, again, I think everything about this business, Nexium as a whole, is a cult. But DOS is basically, it was the downfall of Nexium. Because again, in 2015, they were at their biggest, their height, they were having the most members join their group. They were basically one of the biggest companies in New York, in California at this time. They had big name people involved. Members, women, were told when they joined this group that Keith had nothing to do with it. He didn't even know about the group. He had no control over what the group did. This group, unlike other groups or other classes in the business, was free to join, but you had to have a higher collateral than ever before. And most of these members took it as they were supposed to pay more, it was going to cost more, they had to offer up more money. But most of them said, anytime they basically said, okay, I am going to offer you $2,000, whoever was recruiting them would say, no, that's not enough. And so they would move on to a different monetary value. No, that's not enough. And so they would ask, well, what can I provide? And so the recruiter would say, well, what don't you want people to know? What would you be afraid to get out to the public? That's the kind of collateral we're asking for. It's something that you don't want to lose. And so, like in many cases of Sarah Edmondson, they would basically tell the people to lie, create this huge lie, Sarah said that her parents, as well as her husband, who was also in Nexium at the time, abused her, that they sexually assaulted her, which again was all a lie. She said that Laura, her recruiter, basically filmed her admitting this in a way that seemed like it was candid, like she didn't know the camera was there, they were in a car. So it basically was supposed to be this big secret. Like, nobody knew. But again, this was a lie, and this was the only collateral Laura would take from Sarah. Other women said that they had to take naked photos and give it to their master.
Their master?
Join the group. Yep. So anybody who was recruited into this group, their recruiter was called their master, and they were their slave. Again, a lot of women had problems with this, but basically the recruiters were able to explain it away as, well, it's not like you're going to be in a cage. It's not like you are going to have to, like, you know, we're not going to do anything bad. You know, you're just a metaphorical slave, which would immediately become a lie because some women claimed that they were tortured if they failed a task. They were asked to clean their master's homes. They were asked to do tasks for their master. So it is a master-slave relationship.
Wasn't they were branded?
Yeah. So pretty much, I can't remember how long into DOS being around. Allison Mack, who was one of the bigger founders of DOS, was in a sexual relationship with Keith, and he was getting tired of her, and she was basically trying to come up with anything and any way to keep him interested, and that's why DOS came around, because it basically allowed them to recruit young women who now have emotional or, you know, physical blackmail that they don't want, naked pictures that they don't want anyone to see. It's being used to basically say, well, you know, now you have to do this job, and the job is you need to seduce Keith. You need to make sure that Keith is interested in you. You need to have sex with Keith. You need to perform for Keith. And so at this time, he's getting to around 60. And so he was having a lot of problems performing. So he was getting very tired of DOS to begin with. He was getting tired of DOS at this point. And Allison suggested, well, what if we brand them? What if they are yours? And he liked that idea quite a bit. And so women, unbeknownst to these women, they are being told that the society is getting a tattoo to commemorate your, you know, membership. You're going to get a tattoo. It's supposed to be this symbol for strength and empowerment. And again, they're told it's supposed to be like a dime size tattoo. And I think they're even told like it can be anywhere on your body. And so most of the women say, fine, okay. Like, I think Sarah said she didn't want to get one. She had never had a tattoo. She didn't want to get a tattoo, but she was pressured into, I think a lot of them were pressured by their blackmail to not say no. You know, if I say no, I'm failing this task, and my blackmail could come out. So once they said yes, they were basically secreted it away to this random house that would later be found out to be Allison Mack's house, where a doctor would use a soldering iron and carve a symbol into their pubic area, right next to their vagina, basically. Most of the women, once they saw the symbol, they didn't really understand what it meant. They didn't see it for what it was. It would later be revealed to be Keith Ranieri and Allison Mack's initials. So now these women have Keith Ranieri and Allison Mack's initials carved into their body next to their vagina. They are now possession of Keith and Allison's. And
I sure wouldn't let him do it.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, it seemed like this was a very traumatic incident for a lot of these women, but what can they do? You can't say no once they have nude photos. They have you confessing to your husband raping you, and you don't want anybody to see that because it's really a lie, and you don't want your husband to be hurt by the fact that you confess to him raping you. So they use this blackmail to brand these women.
My husband raped me. I would.
But that's the thing, is that he didn't. The thing is that these instances that they confess to never happened. So that's why they don't want people that's why they don't want it to come out, is because it's a lie. And now their husband's going to be in trouble for something he didn't do, And so Sarah Edmondson was, again, one of the first women to come forward. And she basically went to the FBI, I think, maybe a week or a month after she was branded. She and her husband left Nexium. They were both in it. They were both high-ranking members of this group. I think they were both proctors, which was basically the highest you could get to outside of Nancy and Keith. And they basically had to put on this performance, because the thing, again, is anybody who left the group was automatically hit with lawsuits, automatically cast down by the group. And so they basically had to make it seem like they were about to get a divorce. They basically had to lie to a bunch of people to make it seem like they didn't really want to leave the group, but they had to work on their marriage. They had a child at the time, and they wanted to be there for their child, and secretly go to the FBI and take this case to the FBI. So 2017, FBI begins their investigation into Nexium, and Keith's basically involvement in sex trafficking and human trafficking. He shortly left after the investigation began. He and a few of his harem of women fled to Mexico, where they wouldn't be arrested until 2018 by Mexican police. And that was basically the end of Nexium. Laura Saltzman, who was one of the leaders of DOS, she only got 5 years probation because she ended up, I think something happened while they were in Mexico whenever they got arrested, which basically disillusioned her to Keith. She was, basically in love with him up until whatever happened in Mexico. And so she decided to, what's it called? There's a term for it, but basically help in the investigation. She basically turned over all the information she had on Keith, everything that was happening. She, she only got 5 years probation. Allison Mack was sentenced to 3 years in prison, 3 years probation, 1,000 hours of community service, as well as a $200,000 or $20,000 fine. Nancy Saltzman, who was the co-founder of the Executive Success Program, was given 42 months in prison with a $150,000 fine. $150,000 fine. And then Keith Ranieri was charged with 120 years in prison, as well as $1.75 million fine. They were all charged with human trafficking, racketeering, fraud, and sexual offenses. And that is the downfall of Nexium, the executive success cult.
That is,
Crazy.
I remember this happening, especially with Alex Mack. It was like a huge news thing that she was like the girl next door, that like perfect little innocent girl kind of thing. She wasn't a party celebrity. So it was like I remember it being such a shock.
Yeah. Because, I mean, it's not like she was just part of this group. She was basically bringing in underage girls to have sex with Keith Ranieri. She was a part of it. And again, like, as I stated at the beginning of this, like, this is I'm condensing so much information just to make it into an hour. There's so much more. There's so much more to like. Keith like was abusing and sexually assaulting young girls this whole time, basically from his early 20s. I think he was 24 and he had unconsensual sex with a 15-year-old girl up until he was arrested. So this is 40 years of this. Yeah. And so there's so much more to the story. But I really wanted to focus more on Nexium as the cult.
Yeah, this was I mean, it seems so crazy, but this was like, I want to say like one of those cults that it's just news stories just recently about this one too that are so ongoing.
Yeah.
So
well, yeah, I think Allison was only sentenced in 2021, to be honest.
Yeah.
Just recently she was sentenced.
Yeah. It's crazy.
And again, Nancy Saltzman is basically, it seems to be in The Vow Part 2, which is going to be a docuseries on HBO. Seems to be like she's trying to basically make this out to Keith as the villain, which he is, but I think she's trying to say like, villain. Oh, the business. Well, and I think she's trying to basically keep the business alive and say like, oh, it's not the business's fault, but it's definitely it's definitely part of it. You know, I think in a whole, Nexium was a cult, and this sex cult was just a product of it.
Right.
Right. I don't want her, because the thing is, like, the trailers are the only thing that's dropped right now, and it even has members who are, I don't know, currently in it, because I don't think it can currently be run as Nexium, but basically people being like, well, this helped me, so I don't know what the problem is, and this program as a whole was the only reason the sex cult happened was because they used emotional manipulation tactics in their classes to make people feel like they weren't the victim. They could never come forward and tell their story because, well, you're at fault. You sent the picture. You took the picture. You put your mortgage up for collateral. It's your fault that this happened to you. So I think that is 100% the reason a lot of these women got into the situation that they were in.
Right. It's kind of like, well, I'm the one that joined. I'm the one that, you know.
Right. That's what it seems like they're trying to make it out as.
It's hard to tell the world that you did such a stupid thing, so you just kind of keep doing it to get by.
Yes.
Yeah. Interesting.
That does happen a lot, though, where there's like a leader of some organization, and when things go bad, they start looking at his history, and he's done this over and over again. He just kind of keeps doing it. You know, lots of preachers and, you know, televangelists and stuff, like, they have a history of doing these bad things. Why did you think this is the time? You know?
This was the time. They were honest and they were sincere.
Yeah. Oh well. All right, you guys. It is 10:38 here. Anything else you guys want to add to the story? Cass, are you done? I'm not cutting you off.
Oh no, that was it. I've got a million more things about this information, but that's all I wanted to get out. That's all I had time for.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in again this week. We're going to be on I think we post every Thursday. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We try. Sometimes I get a little too busy and forget, but I try.
Right. So check us out in our next episode next Thursday. And please, again, like, share, comment, subscribe. Let us know your thoughts at the Family School of Thought.
Would you fall for Nexium? Would you join the Nexium cult? Let us know.
Because we're all way too smart.
I know, right? None of us would ever fall for that. All right, bye guys.
Okay, guys. Thank you. Bye, everybody.